This is the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and a lot of people, including myself, have compared the iPhone 14 Pro to their dedicated video and photo cameras. I've already done so in the previous video where I compared it to my A7 III for stills, but today I wanted to compare it to the Sony FX9. This is my dedicated video camera that I use for my talking head, for really any video that you see produced from me on YouTube or any platform. And I wanted to see what cinematic mode looks like compared to an actual cinema camera using cinema lenses. So I actually chose to go with the SLR Magic Micro Primes. I chose to go with the SLR Magic lenses because they provide that cinematic look that a lot of us enjoy, you know, from the bokeh swirl in the background to some of the halation and the imperfections that we call characteristics. So I decided to strap the iPhone 14 Pro Max on top of my Sony FX9 and get some comparison shots so that we can go over them today and see how cinematic mode really stacks up. Oh, and yeah, this is Brady. He'll be helping us out in a few of these shots and modeling to give us an idea of what a human subject looks like in cinematic mode. So this year, Apple finally decided to give us 24 frames per second in cinematic mode with the iPhone 14 Pro Max on iOS 16. And a lot of people wanted 24 frames per second on the iPhone in cinematic mode to have it be truly considered cinematic mode, since most of the movies that we watch are in 24 frames per second. So there are a couple things to consider before looking at this footage in regards to the iPhone focal lengths and the lenses that I chose for this comparison. So the iPhone 14 Pro Max has 3 lenses, right? So on cinematic mode, you can only use 2 of them now, and that's 1x and 3x. And for all of us out there that buy lenses and cameras or in this world of, you know, cinematography, that equates to 24mm on the wide and 77mm on the telephoto. And the closest lenses I have to match those focal lengths are from SLR Magic, and they are the 25mm micro prime and the 75mm micro prime. So when you're looking at these comparisons and we're looking at the wide shots, the footage from the FX9 is going to be slightly narrower, I guess you could say, 1mm difference, and the footage on the telephoto shots from the iPhone is going to be a little bit tighter versus the FX9 being a little bit wider at 2mm difference. So, but they're pretty close. I mean, you could tell for sure, but they're pretty close. And we're not playing the guessing game of what footage came from what camera. I just want to actually show you guys the shots and how they compare. Now, in my opinion, a lot of the characteristics that I enjoy about the iPhone are still present in cinematic mode. Great dynamic range. I'm able to get a lot of color still from the sky. It's extremely blue. I had to tone it down a little bit in post because it was a little too blue. The shadows, great shadow detail, and overall the sharpness is pretty good on the things that are in focus. But in my opinion, where it starts to fall apart is going to be in edge detection and the depth of field focus fall off. Now, things have gotten way better on the iPhone as far as portrait mode goes and edge detection over the years. Ever since the iPhone 7 Plus, I believe, they've had portrait mode and photo. So they've had time and generations to perfect that mode and that method and that algorithm and that computational photography. But things get pretty complex when you try to translate that over to video, because instead of 1 frame for 1 photo, you have 24 frames per second of video. And your camera and your processor and whatever other computational EPU, GPUs, Google Gaga, whatever technical mumbo jumbo is in there, is having to compute that in real time at 24 frames per second of the video. And I think that's a huge task that goes kind of over your head. You know, you're not thinking like when you're doing cinematic mode, like, oh, this blur doesn't look real. But I mean, the phone's doing a lot of work. And I don't believe that we're gonna see a perfected cinematic mode for probably another 4 generations of the iPhone. So maybe like the iPhone 18, we'll probably see a really good cinematic mode, because I don't know if the computational photography, videography is caught up to the point where it can really accurately detect edges and give us realistic fall off. In my opinion, there is really no comparison. Of course, you could probably use this cinematic footage for things that are on, you know, smaller displays, but if you blow this up on a TV or a large iPad, it's gonna be kind of glaringly obvious that it's cinematic mode footage. And the weird thing is, for me, is that with portrait mode, they've gotten really good with front focus, right? So they've gotten really good at there being foreground and background and adjusting that blur accordingly. But in video, the foreground blur looks so weird. You can really see it present in this shot right here. When you're looking at these leaves, that weird halo blur, not blur, is really off-putting, and it's weird to see that artifacting that's going on around those leaves. And then also even on the center leaf that's in focus, that's supposed to be in focus, the edge detection is way off. And these are all shot at like f5, f6. I want to say between f4, 5, and f6. So in those scenarios, on a regular camera with regular lenses, if you shoot anything at f4, whatever your subject is going to be tack sharp, and the edges are going to be clean. You're going to have probably a little bit of fall off depending on, or a little bit of background blur depending on what lens you're using. If it's a full frame lens, a medium format lens, you're going to have a good amount of depth of field. But on the iPhone, if you're shooting at like f4, 5, it looks like the background is blown completely out. It's like super blurry. It's like Vaseline on your lens. Is crazy. Like, I feel like they need to adjust the algorithm as far as what 2.8 or 1.8 is versus a 4.5. Things don't start looking realistic until you get to like f10, which is crazy to me, because at f10 it kind of defeats the purpose of even having cinematic mode, because the depth that they're trying to create, I don't know if they're trying to have like a full frame equivalent depth, or a Super 35 equivalent depth, or a medium format equivalent depth, but the f-stops don't match up, in my opinion, to the depth of field that you're getting from the iPhone. But one sentiment that carries over for me from the photo comparison that I did in the previous video, and even some of the comments that I read, is that it's amazing that you can pull out your phone and get these results. Albeit the comparison between, you know, cinematic mode on the phone and an actual, you know, $11,000-$12,000 cinema camera with cinema lenses is a little different. You're not going to get the, you know, apples to apples comparison. It's not going to look on par right now, but for stills, it's pretty up there until you start, you know, dealing with portrait mode. I think they have a long way to go with portrait mode and depth of field and that algorithm and cinematic mode, to where we can actually get that real pro look. But I'm happy to say that I can pull out my phone from my pocket and get something, you know, get something usable. That's something that was not the case 10 years ago, was not the case 5 years ago, probably, was not the case when I first started, you know, YouTube. I started YouTube on a shitty LG laptop that I bought from Walmart with a handful of gift cards, and I had a really bad webcam, and you'll never see these videos. These videos will never be on YouTube. They were on YouTube on an old channel, but I lost all those videos a long time ago with a hard drive. RIP. But yeah, it's come a long way. Camera technology has come a long way. Cell phone and mobile consumer products have come a long way. It's making a lot of it attainable for people that are creative, or that aspire to be creative, and that want to create things with their phones and have that accessibility. The barrier of entry is lowering, and in the next 4 or 5 years, it's going to be scary for companies out there that are making these high-end cameras and that are making these high-end products to compete, because computational video and photography is going to be amazing. And this I wouldn't take this as a bad thing, looking at this footage and comparing it, because the ceiling is so high. But yeah, that's about it for me, guys. It's been a pleasure as usual. Thank you for watching. If you made it to the end, you made it to me rambling, I appreciate you, and thank you for commenting, liking, all this content that I've been putting out lately. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you do, feel free to subscribe. You know the drill. Do the YouTube thing. I appreciate you. But until next time, guys, stay fresh.